and Riv on the side stage.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Great cast on the day. I am joined by TSM Haunter after their victory over Dignitas back in the NALCS. And I got to ask you guys back as well. It seems like things are gelling a little bit more. Coming into the second week, how are you feeling about your gameplay in the top, Haunter? How are things going?
So in the first week, I definitely played like shit. I think I just underperformed really hard, and like as a team, we just weren't up to par, like individually and as a team as a whole. But now coming into week 2, I know what problems I need to solve. We're all working hard to solve our issues, and I think we're feeling a lot more confident.
Has it been interesting without Doublelift on the team where the obligations have to go after that, maybe another voice from Bio on the bottom? Has that been tough for the team?
It's definitely been a struggle because Peter was super decisive, and he basically always forced plays around him. So the team had to take care of him. But now that we have Turtle, it was just we kind of don't have as much direction as we used to. So we're just looking to find that groove back.
And last time I got to speak to you was at finals in Canada, and I kind of spoke to you about wanting to be the top laner for NALCS. How is that working out now? You have Flame to go against, Someday to go against. Obviously, you're still fighting for that position, but how is the competition up there this season?
It's really hard to tell because it's really early in the season, and haven't played that many opponents yet. But definitely the top playing pool has gotten a lot better, and it's going to be a lot more competitive than it was last year.
Well, doing better. Undefeated on Nautilus, that 1-0-10 game. You guys go into another difficult match tomorrow against Team Liquid. You're going to be facing Lorlo up there. How do you feel about the matchup and just overall the game?
I think it's going to be a pretty easy game for us.
All right, well, you heard it here from Haunter. Final words on that. TSM taking the win over Dignitas. We're going to throw it to the analyst desk to break down the rest of the day.
Thank you very much, Riv. Strong words out of Haunter there leading into tomorrow's matchup against Team Liquid after the 2-1 victory here for TSM. But I do have to say, those last 2 games there looked so much better out of TSM as opposed to the ones previously played in week 1.
Yeah, the cash just kept hitting it. Even just the first game of the series, the next 2 games looked incredibly different. The upward trajectory throughout that series was great. Haunter was talking about they all had a lot to work on after week 1. They seem to be making pretty good progress. This definitely wasn't the perfect series, but they got cleaner and cleaner as the day progressed.
Right, and so if we take a look at the team compositions put together, we saw the tank v tank matchup in the top lane. So Dignitas opted to go back towards that Maokai for Someday. Not quite enough for him this time around because TSM, with all of that focus to the mid lane and getting Bjergsen ahead, just catapulted them to a victory this time around.
Yeah, when you get Bjergsen ahead on Cassiopeia, in a front versus front team fighting composition where really it's who can kill the tanks first, you're going to have a bad time trying to team fight that straight up. And because once that happened, Team Dignitas wasn't able to orchestrate any super creative plays to kind of regain their foothold, Bjergsen's the best in the business there in the mid lane, and the rest of the team was pretty solid.
Especially when you consider the fact that pretty early on in the game, we had CS advantages in top, jungle, and bot lane for Dignitas. The only winning lane, in a sense, was Bjergsen in the mid lane. But exactly as you mentioned, it's the exact person on that team that they needed to be ahead in order to eat through that Maokai and the high health builders on the side of Team Dignitas.
Yeah, and this was the promising thing for TSM as well. When they had those disadvantages in the side lanes, they very quickly moved them around, right? Haunter, you could argue, had the disadvantage because he got Bjergsen ahead. And then when the bottom lane was losing, they immediately shoot those guys up to the top lane to get the first turret gold for the team. So they were very proactive in their disadvantage lanes, and it was quite successful.
And let's go ahead and take a look at the one fight 24 minutes into the game. TSM turning this around off of Dignitas aggression. This looked like an easy dig win here.
Yeah, we were wondering how this went 4 kills for TSM, but it's because no one could follow through to finish off Wild Turtle, in part because Laud burned his flash previously, and Haunter's TP also blocked the rest of them, and it's very difficult to move past the front line when both teams have compositions like this, unless you have Kha'Zix, who is one person who can have pretty good backline access, and then King just stuck around too long, and the game was maybe 1,000 gold different at that point, and then once that happened, it was over.
Right, look, I mean, that was around the 25-minute mark there, and you can see it on the gold difference over time. That big spike, that was that fight there. Of course, they went and picked up the Baron off the backside of that. Pretty easy to push down the turrets from then on out. Someday unable to match Nautilus in the split push once that Baron buff is there. So a large influx of gold at that point. And TSM is clearly still capable, with Bjergsen at the helm, of closing out a game when ahead, right? It's just that up to this point, we hadn't seen them in this position too many times.
Absolutely, and it is going to be an adjustment period for TSM. Turns out Doublelift was a pretty good shot caller. A skill he developed throughout his career for sure, but you can definitely feel his absence, and Hanser talked about it even in that interview. They play much slower. It looks more like 2015 TSM than 2016 TSM, the last time Bjergsen was the primary shot caller. So they still need to find a way to accelerate that pace of game, because there were a lot of good things that came from TSM being so aggressive last year.
I was about to say, whether or not Doublelift's individual calls were good or bad, kind of irrelevant.
They were there.
Yeah, what Hunter was saying is that we had direction because he was an aggressive person who asked for things to get done. And if we follow up on it, then hey, that's action rather than inaction. So it's paying off for TSM here. When they're able to take action, they're going to have to figure out who is, whose shoulders that responsibility is going to land on. Now, if there is going to be criticism thrown towards any player here in this game, I do have to look at Wild Turtle on the side of TSM, missing a lot of Varus ultimates there. So mechanically still not necessarily hitting the mark, which I feel against the very top tier teams and in more and more high pressure situations could definitely bite them.
He missed a lot of skill shots, and he also had a few oopsies throughout the series, like the time where he got caught in the bot lane, recall shopping, and gave a free kill over onto Kha'Zix. I believe that was in game 2.
Yep.
Very low percentage, as we mentioned, on ultimates, which are key abilities when they're running pick compositions like that. And they didn't have laning phase victories. Mind you, they weren't picking themselves into winning situations, but that is definitely a very clear area for improvement.
Yeah, but a player who stepped up in this game was Hanser. From the top lane, we saw a very early roam down to the mid lane, the flash auto on Nautilus to get the root. Absolutely loved what is, as mechanical a play as Nautilus can muster. But, he has found a way to affect the map as a pretty much solely tank player and get Bjergsen ahead as their main carry.
Yeah, I think there will be arguments for Hanser in game 2 on the Poppy as well, but it's kind of just who is able to find the way to get the team the first advantage, because those are the hardest to come by.
Yep.
I like the fact that Hanser also was able to step up against Someday after Someday had such a dominating game 1, and you could kind of tell that TSM really they learned almost how to deal with him throughout the series, and Hanser made a ton of plays throughout that game.
Right, it would be easy to roll over and take your lickings after a loss against a Fiora like that, but he turns it around. TSM picks up the victory with 2 more matches under our belts. Let's go ahead and take a look at the standings. FlyQuest is now in sole position. FlyQuest, what are you doing up there at the top of the tables? 3-0, but hey, they earned it. Then, with their win, TSM holds on to 3rd place at 2-1, leaving CLG and Team Dignitas tied for 7th place after today's games. But plenty can change as we still have a weekend of games ahead of us. Tomorrow on NALCS 1, we have Immortals facing off against Cloud9, with TSM loading back into the battle arena to play Team Liquid. That's a big one. That Hanser and Lorlo matchup will be fun to watch, especially after the commentary in that interview. Then on NALCS 2, Envy take on Phoenix 1 with Echo Fox versus Team Dignitas later in the day. So we already mentioned this Team Liquid TSM game. How do you expect that to play out, especially with how well Lorlo has been playing so far this split?
Exactly, and also you say Team Liquid lost to FlyQuest. Maybe they're a little shaky, but it turns out FlyQuest is playing very well. This game will tell us a lot, especially because TSM is starting to play a little cleaner, and Team Liquid has some time to pick things up. If it turns into another one of those top lane focused games, so much of it does actually swing on that draft phase. Because I feel like if TSM is able to manipulate tank versus tank matchups, they're heavily advantaged. So if Lorlo, I feel like, wants to have an edge, they have to find a way to give him a winning lane.
Exactly. I mean, Hanser has illustrated today that he can go up against other top-tier top laners in Someday. Lorlo, who's been performing both on the carries and the tanks, should be able to be kept under control if Sven Skaren makes his visits up there. The mid lane is where I'm looking. Bjergsen against, say, Golden Glue or Link, if they decide to bring him in, seems even more lopsided to me than Bjergsen versus Keen.
Exactly, and I think that's why TSM would have the advantage in the tank matchup, because so much of that depends on how good your damage is and how well they can cut through the front line.
Right.
Bjergsen's Cassiopeia play has been very good so far this year.
Well, TSM's got a win under their belt this weekend. They'll be moving in tomorrow with some confidence. From all of us here, though, on the live broadcast crew, we got to thank you for joining us, and we'll see you here tomorrow. So have a good night.